Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Actually, are we supposed to be, we should be singing Yanila Premodana, right? Should break out the songbooks. I mean, it's 1, 2, 3 disappearance days. And that particular song was written by Narottam Das Thakur when Shrinivasa Acharya disappeared. And Ramachandra, his best friend. So, I'll definitely be singing it today. It's written specifically on this occasion. Ramachandra Kaviraj and Shrinivasa Acharya. They're mentioned in the last verse. So, Jaya Nilo Premadana Karuna Prachur. Jaya Nilo Premadana Karuna Prachur. Heno Prabhu Kotha Gela Acharya Thakur. Prabhu Kotha Gela Acharya Thakur. Kamora Swarup Rupa Ka Sanatan. Swarup Rupa Sanata Kahadasa Raghunatha Potita Pavan. Dasa Raghunatha Potita Pavan. Kamora Bhata Yuga Kavira. Eka kale kotha gela Gaura-ganodesa-dipika. Bhashane kuti bhomata anale bhashibo. Gauranga gunera nidhi kota gele pabo. Se sabasangira shange je koi lo bilas. Se sangana paya kande narotamoda. Se sangana paya kande narotamoda. Nilo Premadana Karuna Prachur. Ena Prabhu Kotha Gela Acharya Thakur. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare. Translation: He who brought the treasure of divine love and who was filled with compassion and mercy, where has such a great personality as Shrinivasa Acharya gone? So it's quite a treasure. Divine love, Krishna Bhakti, pure love of Krishna, and all that compassion and mercy. I was just thinking, I don't know what happened to it, but on the billboard, someone won that $1 billion. You? Okay. Can you imagine someone showed up with $1 billion? Now that's quite a treasure, right? But it's completely insignificant in comparison to someone who brings you the treasure of pure Krishna prema, and his heart is filled with compassion and mercy. So, where are my Sup Damodar and Rupa Goswami? Where is Sanatan? Where is Raghunath Das, the savior of the fallen? Where are my Raghunath Bhatta and Gopal Bhatta? And where is Krishna Das Kaviraj? Where did Lord Gauranga, the great dancer, suddenly go? I will smash my head against a rock and enter into fire. Where will I find Lord Gauranga, the reservoir of all wonderful qualities? Being unable to obtain the association of Lord Gauranga, accompanied by all of these devotees in whose association he performed his pastimes, Narottam Das simply weeps. So this is our Vipralambra. Not only are devotees feeling separation from Krishna, they're feeling separation from other devotees. That's one of the essential emotions in Krishna consciousness, to be and Narottam Das Thakur, that's when he appeared, just as everyone was leaving. So he experienced this emotion, which is actually considered even stronger and greater than sambhog. Separation is a stronger emotion than when you're actually in someone's association. So, but he's revealing this emotion and how a devotee responds when they're missing some other devotees and the Lord himself. So, okay. So do you want to have some readings first or class? Readings? Okay. Yeah, I guess so. I forgot it was there. Radha? You mean Gopastami? Jai Radha Madhava? Usually they sing one or the other, right? Oh, okay. It's up to you. We can just sing all day.
I was just curious.
Vaishnavas are always singing, so we'll just move breakfast up to lunch. I mean, there's enough to read about Shrinivasa Acharya to keep everyone here until dinner. So that's for sure.
The real food is the knowledge, right?
Yes. So I've got one vote. But let's read it. Okay. Now this Gadadhar is not Gadadhar of the Panchatattva. It's another Gadadhar. It's his disappearance day. Very confidential servant of Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda. He's an incarnation of the effulgence of Srimati Radharani's body. Don't try to figure that out. That's just what it is, okay? He is actually an incarnation of the effulgence of Srimati Radharani, as well as an expansion of a gopi named Purnananda, full of bliss. He was one of the associates of Lord Nityananda Prabhu, the majority of who were cowherd boys in Krishna Leela, but he was absorbed in the mood of a gopi. Usually the associates of Lord Nityananda are all cowherd boys, but he was like that. So sometimes he'd be in that mood like that. So now Dhananjaya, it says he was a rare soul, and Nityananda Prabhu was always present in his heart. I just want to go there. Sometimes they list all the different places they visited and so on. Okay. It just lists some different places he went to, like that. And that he appeared today. This is Ashtami, 8th day of the bright fortnight in the month of Kartik. And there is a temple in Bengal area near Bolpur where descendants of his disciples are still there worshiping his deities. Okay, and then Shrinivasa Acharya. I think I'm just going to read from this book. Two different excerpts. As I said, you can read and read and read all day long. There's two different things I like to read about. Now, Maharaj mentioned some things about Shrinivasa Acharya this morning. He was the first Sankirtan party in our movement. Shrinivasa Acharya, Narottam Das Thakur, and... No. What is it? Well, it's right here. Jiva Goswami sent them out. Shyamananda, that was it. Okay, so Jiva goes, what it was that all the books were there in Vrindavan. They wanted to bring them all to, written so many books, Gaudiya Vaishnava literatures by the Goswamis and other self-realized souls in Vrindavan. So they copied them and they wanted to send them all to Bengal so the devotees there could relish and also was to establish the Siddhanta of the movement. What are we supposed to think as Gaudiya Vaishnavas? So these three devotees were gathered and sent. You didn't have UPS back then, right? Couldn't hop in your van and drive them somewhere. So they're on a bullock cart, like that. It's called snail mail, right? Bullock mail. So they were just going. The company, they had some guards too, like that. Okay, so Jiva Goswami had a very rich merchant disciple in Mathura who provided a very strong cart and guards, 10 armed guards, and these three devotees. And when they set out, many of the devotees followed them as far as Mathura, and then as far as Agra. And then at Agra, and that's where the Taj Mahal is now, they stopped and then they continued on. So it's described here. After many months of traveling, not like a day or two or a week, months of walking on foot and traveling, they approached the land of Gaura-ganodesa or Bengal. Confident that their mission was nearing completion, they decided to rest in a small village named Gopalpur. That's a nice name. The town of Gopalpur, just within the boundaries of the Malla kingdom of Vana Vishnupur. Here, the priceless cargo of books was stolen. But before retelling the details of this heart-rending episode, some historical background would be useful. So we're going to just skip over that. So there's a king there, Humbir, generally known as Bir Humbir, was the leader of a strong body of bandits. So he was a king, but on the side he was actually had a bunch of bandits. He was the king of the bandits. He had employed a large number of thugs. And that word actually is Hindi. Thuggy comes from thugi. It's Hindi for dacoit. And assassins, not just beating people, but killing them, assassins, who infested the highways and killed and robbed the wayfarers. So that's how he got a little cut on the side as the king. He could just extracting taxes was not enough. So he had some astrologers in his court. You always wonder about this. If you had a good astrologer, couldn't they tell you a winning number for the lottery or something like that, right? If you're that good. But I think you're not supposed to use it for that. That's the reason. But anyways, these astrologers of the court were ever ready to submit to him confidential reports as to what fortunes the stars would grant him if he carried on robberies in particular localities. The king of dacoits The king's dacoits were following Shrinivas, Narottam, and Shyamananda for some time, carefully surveying the well-protected cart of priceless manuscripts from afar. Because you imagine, they see it going down the road. Now, there's 10 guards there with weapons. Now, why would there be 10 guards unless there's something really valuable on that cart? So according to the Bhakti Ratnakara, they had planned to rob the caravan for quite a distance, because keeping it under strict surveillance, but they tactfully waited until it reached the jurisdiction of their own king's kingdom. The court dacoits soon detected that only 15 men accompanied the cart, 10 armed soldiers, 3 holy men, and 2 cartmen. Let's see here. But what is the king told them? Oh, here it is. The band of dacoits now numbering over 200. 200 against how many? 15. There's 15. 10 guards, 3 sadhus, and 2 cartmen. So, what are the odds? So, the band of dacoits, now numbering over 200, inflamed each other's imagination while discussing one of the astrologers' exact words. Quote, "This cart is filled with gems that are more valuable than gold," unquote. So they're all thinking, whoa, this is going to be a good pull, heist. So, excited by the possibility of an enormous fortune, they were about to overtake the caravan in a village named Tamar, but circumstance did not permit it. And then they followed him some further, and then it says that on the dark night, and luminous stars were only witnesses to the surreptitious theft of the manuscripts. All the 15 men were sleeping very quietly, so there's no violence, and they just kind of like snuck into the campground, and they just took everything. So when they woke up, their priceless treasure was gone. The 3 stalwarts could not contain their tears. But Shrinivas, the senior man of the party, advised the other 2, Narottam and Shyamananda, to dry their tears and to proceed with their mission of bringing the message of the 6 Goswamis to various parts of Bengal and Orissa. In other words, just keep preaching even though the books aren't there. Shrinivasa Acharya, whose disappearances, they made it his own solemn duty and vowed to retrieve the manuscripts. And he wrote to Jiva Goswami and told him all that had transpired. So here it goes. So Shrinivasa appears in a dream. Oh, okay. What happened is that king gets the treasure chest, and Birhambir dropped everything else and feverishly unwrapped his latest prize. There is supposed to be gems more valuable than what? Gold. Okay. After having heard the prophecies, he could scarcely imagine what splendors awaited him. In one successful moment, he removed the cloth covering and opened the trunk to reveal mere manuscripts. What a shock! Where was the priceless treasure? Lifting out the top manuscript in disbelief, the king saw the signature, Sri Rupa Goswami, written on a palm leaf. When he examined further and saw Sri Rupa's beautiful exposition of Vaishnava philosophy, he felt something change deep within. According to the Gaura Prasad Charitawali, Bahambir attained love of God at that moment, just by touching Rupa Goswami's books. He then reverentially returned the book to the trunk and retired for the evening, aware of the grave sin that he had foolishly instigated. So as the king rested, he had an unusual dream. He saw a beautiful and effulgent person whose body was filled with divine energy. With a loving smile, that person spoke to him, "Do not worry, soon I will come to Vishnupur and we shall meet. I will retrieve my manuscripts and you will be relieved of all sinful reactions." What a beautiful dream. Who was in the dream? Shrinivasa Acharya. At that time, your joy will be boundless. Know for certain that you are my eternal servant, life after life, and I'm your eternal well-wisher. The next morning, the king woke up and started his life anew, waiting for the day when this mysterious dream would come true. Meanwhile, Shrinivasa Acharya made his way to the outskirts of Vishnupur, where he met a Brahmin resident named Sri Krishna Ballabha. The 2 Pandits became friends, and Krishna Ballabha graciously invited Shrinivas to be a guest in his home. Gradually, he realized Shrinivas's exalted position and surrendered to him as a pupil. Okay. In due course, Krishna Vallabha mentioned that the king regularly convened a Bhagavatam study group for all who were interested. Shrinivas, it's interesting, the guy's a nonsense king and a dacoit, but he has Bhagavatam class. So just trying to keep all bases covered, right? Shrinivas is extremely curious as to the nature of the Bhagavatam presentation and asked Krishna Vallabha to take him to the next meeting. When they arrived, Vyasacharya, the court Pandit, what a nice name, the court Pandit Vyasacharya, was reciting and commenting on the Bhagavatam. Shrinivas was unimpressed. But he said nothing. The next day they arrived again, and this time too Vyasacharya was pontificating in the same fashion. You know what pontificating means? Yeah, pontificating. Okay, in the same fashion. After 2 weeks of the court Pandit's intolerable display, Shrinivas could not contain himself, and so after the meeting he spoke to Vyasacharya. You, sir, do not follow the text, nor are your commentaries in line with Sridhar Swami or the other standard exponents of Bhagavad philosophy. Vyasacharya listened to Srinivas's comments but ignored his advice. However, the king who was nearby, what's the king's name? Bahimbar, right? Okay. Overheard what was said and found it interesting. The next day at the recital, Vyasacharya again attempted to elucidate the esoteric section of the Bhagavatam that delineates Sri Krishna's Rasa Leela. Respectful but firm, Srinivas interrupted with a question. Sir, how can you comment on such confidential subjects without referring to the authoritative statements of Sridhar Swami? You are obviously unfamiliar with his work. Vyasacharya now became angry. He didn't like being challenged in front of his sycophantic assembly. You know what kind of assembly that is? A sycophant? Just someone who follows you blindly. Oh, yes, Govardhan, you're the best. You're wonderful. Oh, you're so fantastic. Whatever you say is the absolute truth. Oh, Govardhan. That's a sycophant, okay? That's just kind of just like falling over the person, so like that. Who were accustomed only to his particular rendition of Bhagavatam commentary. But before another word was said, however, the king who was in the audience began to defend Srinivas's position. How is it that this Brahmin scholar finds fault with your explanations? Perhaps your interpretations are questionable. To this, the arrogant Vyasacharya replied, Who can interpret the text better than I? This newcomer is an upstart, and he dares to question me in the presence of your majesty. Then he turned to Shrinivas and indignantly quipped, If you are such an authority on the Bhagavatam, why don't you come and sit here and explain these same verses in a more brilliant way? Krishna in the heart told him to say that. Shrinivas rose to the challenge. He recited the Bhagavatam verses in the most melodious style, and then he spontaneously commented upon them with great verve and authority. So obviously we know what happens. He won the king's heart. Vyasacharya could not believe his ears. He was defeated, but he was happy. So he was a humble person. King Birhambir was greatly moved and spoke to Shrinivas. No one has ever come to this kingdom and shared so much love and scholarship in the way you have. Please tell me your name and from where do you come? Shrinivas replied, My name is Shrinivas and I am a native of this country, Bengal. I came here to see your magnificent court and to relish the Bhagavatam. The king then gave him the best accommodations in the palace and asked him to stay as long as he liked. Later that evening, the king asked Shrinivas to dine with him. But Shrinivas said that he took only one humble meal per day, and that was already eaten. Nonetheless, Birhambir encouraged him to have some fruit, and he complied, not wanting to offend his distinguished host. As Shrinivas ate his fruit, the king sat at his side like a humble servant. He had never felt this way about anyone. Shrinivas was that effulgent person who had appeared in his dream, his guru, and he wanted to render some menial service, so he recognized him. That night, Birhambir heard Shrinivas repeating the name of Krishna through the wall, since his room was right next to the one which had had his honor's guest stay in. It seemed as though Shrinivas did not sleep. He was a genuine saint, thought the king. He is simply absorbed in the name of God. With this pleasant idea, the king fell asleep listening to Shrinivas' blissful voice in the next room. The following day in the great assembly, Shrinivas again spoke from the Bhagavatam. Once again, the eager, expectant audience relished every word. Shrinivas astonished all who listened. Chroniclers of the event have reported that even the stone walls of the hall seemed to melt at the pathos. That means the emotion. Shrinivas spoke with enough erudition, sensitivity, and devotion to honor his Vaishnava predecessors, and all who were present agreed that the wisdom of the orator far exceeded his years. One by one, people came and bowed to Srinivas's feet, hoping he would accept them as his disciples. And later, the king submitted himself to Shrinivas. He said, "You are the real king," he said, "for you have love for Krishna. I am not even worthy to be in your presence." Shrinivas, with all humility at this command, merely shook his head. He was not able to accept his own exalted position. But the king persisted. "Allow me to be your servant, please. How can I serve you? My entire kingdom is at your disposal." Now Shrinivas replies, "I came here from the holy city of Vrindavan with a mission from Gopal Bhatta Goswami and Jiva Goswami. I was to bring their original literature to Bengal, but this treasure was unfortunately robbed within your kingdom. If I cannot retrieve these books, I would prefer to lose my life. Can you help me get them back?" The remorseful king burst into tears. "A poor worm as am I." That's a good line. "A poor worm am I." Right? So if you're ever feeling humble, what are you going to say? Poor worm am I, lost hopelessly in this land of birth and death. My own men have pillaged for years and years under my order, and they came upon your caravan. We were told it was the greatest treasure in the universe, and we naturally pursued it. I cannot express my sorrow." Then, reflecting for a moment, the king said, "But there is a positive side to all of this. Our meeting would not have taken place if all these events had not occurred. I would commit these sins again and again for but a moment of your association." Shrinivas laughingly reassured him that such sinful life was unnecessary for attaining his association. In fact, Shrinivas told him that sinful life was an obstacle to spiritual progress. Shrinivas then forgave the king for all his sins he had committed, but asked him to sin no more. The king, of course, was more than ready to comply. Grateful for Shrinivas's mercy, the king led him to the room where the treasures were kept. So of course, he recovered them all, and he initiated the king. The king became his disciple. His name was Hari Charan Das, that king. And it says Jiva Goswami renamed him Chaitanya Das later on, and the king's wife, Queen Shulakshana, and their son, Prince Dhati Hambir, also became Shrinivasa Acharya's surrendered servants. The queen's initiated name is unknown, but the boy was Gopal Das. So anyways, he returned got all the books. And the king actually reigned for quite some time, and he wrote many devotional songs. Became a great poet, Vaishnava poet, so by the mercy of Shrinivasa Acharya. So there's two things Srinivasa we're going to read next is Srinivas's internal devotional service. But I wanted to read that because although he's such an exalted Vaishnava, his 2 feet are on the ground, so to speak, and preaching in this material world. So spirituality or Krishna consciousness doesn't mean you were oblivious to what's going on. As soon as the books were stolen, he said, "You two go keep preaching, and I'm going to find the books, whatever it takes." And by his spiritual potency, of course, he found the books. And not only that, but initiated the king, the queen, and so many people. And that whole area of Vishnupur became a great center of Krishna consciousness. That's described in more detail in this biography. But now here's another aspect of Srinivasa Acharya's spiritual life, besides being such a dynamic, a powerful preacher of Krishna consciousness, of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message. Manjari Bhava. Let's see here. So it says, while he was there, he spent a lot of time in Vishnupur. This Bahir, whatever, the king, Haricharan Das. He was an exemplary preacher, but he also was an excellent Bhajananandi, an inner worshipper, as seen by his absorption in Manjari Bhava, or his inner meditation on his ontological form as a maidservant of Srimati Radharani. So in other words, he was on the level of Krishna consciousness where he was fully aware of who he is in the spiritual world. So the wonderful story here. And we'll probably end with this story, and this verse will be saved for tomorrow. Is that okay? Because I don't think I can give like a 30-minute Bhagavatam class, 30-second Bhagavatam class. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Tat Sat. Thanks a lot. That's it. So here it is. In this connection, one interesting story, among others, many others, is related in all of Srinivasa's authorized biographies. Once, while in Vana Vishnupur, Shrinivas fell into a trance while meditating on his form as Mani Manjari. There you go. In the spiritual realm, as he fixed his mind on Radharani's water sports in Vrindavan, he relished watching her splash about in the Jamuna with Krishna and her intimate gopi friends. But in the middle of her playful dealings, her nose ornament, Vasari, fell into dark blue waters, and only Rupa Manjari noticed that it had fallen from her moon-like face. At this point, Rupa Manjari winked at Guna Manjari, Gopal Bhatta Goswami. So the Goswamis are all these Manjaris, who, knowing the mind of Sri Rupa, dove in to look for the lost nose ring. Guna Manjari searched the transparent waters in vain, however, because the blessed ornament could not be found. Guna Manjari had even engaged Mani Manjari, Srinivas himself, in the search, but to no avail. So no one could find the nose ring. Srinivas continued his meditation on this pastime day and night for 3 days without a break. So he's sitting there in meditation, completely in a different world. However, in the external world, his wives were now beside themselves with grief. Will Shrinivas ever come out of his meditative trance? Is he dead? His body had become stiff and his breathing was slight. Who was it? Is everybody happy? Who was that one sadhu? He lived in Pondicherry. He was actually a terrorist, and he hid out there when the British were after him. Who was that one? Big beard, and all have big beards. No. He was a bogey yogi. He was the one who said, "Is everyone happy? Is everyone happy?" What was his name? Anyways, when he passed away, he was kind of just sitting there, and he passed away, and the disciples thought he was all in samadhi, but actually he was dead. And after a few days, his body started stinking, and they realized, so he wasn't in samadhi, he's just dead. He's dead. Mayor Baba. Mayor Baba. Yeah, Mayor Baba. That was his famous line, "Is everyone happy?" Like that. He was a Mayavadi. But anyways, so anyways, they're thinking he's sitting there for 3 days. Imagine if you went to the ashram and Balaram was just sitting in his room for 3 days. It's kind of like just barely breathing. It's like, what's going on? So, his wife started to cry out loud. Soon the king came running, and when he observed Srinivasa's condition, he too was very deeply concerned. The body requires food. If the Acharya does not soon return to our plane of existence, he may permanently leave us. Nonetheless, the king consoled himself and Srinivasa's wives. When the court physicians examined Srinivasa's body, it was still in a healthy state. But how long could even the healthiest man exist without food? Of course, it might be prudent to note at this point that such states of exalted consciousness are rare, and one should not attempt to imitate them. According to the Vedic tradition, those who are in the neophyte and intermediate stages of devotional service should concentrate on required Vaidhi sadhan under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master, And it is by this method that one can gradually attain the higher levels of bhava and prema as exhibited by Shrinivasa Acharya. Because there are people in Vrindavan who you can take initiation from, and they will tell you who you are in the spiritual world, or they'll actually tell you you're a gopi, and then you all day long you engage in gopi bhav kind of stuff, even though you have absolutely no qualification. Right? I mean, would it help you if I told you you were a peacock in the spiritual world? Would your Sankirtan scores go up, or what would you do? Like that. Because there's absolutely no value to us in the bodily concept of life. Absolutely no value. But it's called cheap. Like that. Sahajiya, it's cheap. So Ishwari, Srinivasa's first wife, thought of Ramachandra Kaviraj, who was his best friend, best friend in Krishna consciousness, his association. If anyone could understand Srinivasa's state and bring him out of it, was Ramachandra. She expressed these thoughts to the king, who quickly sent for Srinivasa's most intimate disciple. He was a disciple, but they were very, 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 very close. After some time, Ramachandra arrived, and seeing the face of his Lord and Master, assured everyone, "Do not fear. Shrinivasa Acharya is in a deep state of samadhi. He will soon return to you." Ramachandra, who was also the embodiment of Mani Manjari, although he is more commonly known as Karuna Manjari. It's interesting, they're both manifestations of the same Manjari. But Ramachandra is also Karuna Manjari. Don't try to figure it out. Sat next to Srinivasa in a meditative trance. So he's sitting next to his spiritual master. In that state, he appeared at the Jamuna, where Srinivasa's Mani Manjari was still looking for Radharani's nose ring. Ramachandra, in his own ontological form as Mani Manjari's other self, jumped into the river and helped Srinivasa find the ornament, which was hidden under a lotus leaf. Giving the nose ring to Mani Manjari, Srinivasa, Ramachandra was happy to assist his guru in this confidential way. At the same time, Radharani finished her water sports and began to dress herself in her beautiful dark blue sari. Her intimate gopi friends naturally assisted her, and when there was one last ornament to place on her person, the nose ring, Guna Manjari. Now, who is Guna Manjari? You remember? Gopal Bhatta Goswami. Confidently looked to Mani Manjari, who, in perfect timing, came out of the Jamuna and delivered the desired apparel. As the finishing touch was placed on Radhika's body, Krishna came to scurry her off into the forest of Vrindavan. The gopis and manjaris watched on in disbelief, mesmerized by the unparalleled beauty that emanated from the divine couple. The scene engulfed them with intense love, and their bodies showed symptoms of spiritual ecstasy. Just then, Ramachandra Kaviraj broke his meditation, as did Srinivas. They turned to look at each other once again in the external world. Laughing like madmen, they embraced and fell to the floor, their eyes emanating tears of love. King Birhambir was never more ecstatic. His master had come back. Ishwari and Gauranga Priya, his wives, cried tears of joy. All the devotees began to chant, Hari, Hari. A huge feast was brought in for the two sadhus who had just returned from an expedition in consciousness in an esoteric journey to the spiritual world. The feast remnants were given to the inner circle of Vishnupur devotees. After eating, the devotees sat at the feet of Srinivasa and Ramachandra, who began to talk about the pastimes of Radha and Krishna throughout the night. So, that's another aspect of Shrinivasa Acharya's life. So, both that and then, as I said earlier, the other pastime of regaining the books and vigorously preaching Krishna consciousness. So, great devotees, they are existing on those two levels simultaneously. Those two levels simultaneously, and they never use. One thing is they never use their spiritual level of spiritual advancement as an excuse not to preach Krishna consciousness. And we see that all the great acharyas, Srila Prabhupada especially as being the most recent in our line, fully there in the spiritual world on that platform, but here, to giving Krishna consciousness to everyone, because that's the service. That's the service that has to be done. So it's 8:30. Any other questions or comments or stories? You're going to say something. There's a microphone for Vaikuntha. There's one right behind you. There you go. There, take it away.
Thank you. My comment was just, at least it was from a lecture by Jayapataka Maharaj, after Virambir became a devotee, right? And another nice thing was he used his wealth to bring all the scribes there to copy the books, which was actually the original intent. They were taking them to Bengal where there were scribes to actually make copies and distribute them to all the Vaishnavas. And so then that king just, not only did he become free from his sins of stealing the books, but he was able to, contribute in that way as a king, which was nice, At least that was in a lecture by Jayapataka Maharaj once when he told that story. And my question was, what you were just describing, with Shrinivasa Acharya and Ramachandra Kaviraj, it seems like that would that be a good example of Nikunja Unirata Kelly City that we sing every morning? How,
Yes.
we're seeing them here, but they're actually having this whole other amazing.
They're on that level. Not all spiritual masters may be on that level, but they're definitely on that level. And it's right there in that verse. The expert assisting the gopis. So, very, very exalted platform of Krishna consciousness. And something to be aspired for. Imagine the day will come when, just all of a sudden, hey, what's the feast about? Oh, well, Balaram and Mani Mandari just came back from the spiritual world. Just like this. Oh, they just came back. Let's have a feast. Hare Krishna. Oh, so-and-so just, Govardhan just went. He'll be back in a few days. Like that. Oh, okay. Let's have a feast when he gets back. So that's to be...
Are any devotees today experiencing that, or do they hide that?
Well, when you say devotees, what circle of devotees are you referring to?
Are there
A New Govardhan, or? Well, I don't know all the devotees in ISKCON, and I definitely don't know all the devotees in the world. But anyone who's on that platform can do like that, so...
There's tons of people on that level.
Yeah, I mean, the whole spiritual world.
Most of them are homeless.
Well, there's just so many. I mean, there's unlimited Vaishnavas. Not unlimited, but so many Vaishnavas. It's rare, though. It's rare in Kali Yuga. Like that. But, Prabhupada set the example as followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Our main business is preaching Krishna consciousness. So these different levels of Krishna consciousness are not generally revealed at all. Because they've been misunderstood. Completely misunderstood. And you have the Sahajiyas who have completely messed everything up by imitating that level of Krishna consciousness. So one has to be very, very careful like that. And we read that. Remember, just a paragraph or two when it would that for us, it's our Vaidhi sadhana. That's our meditation. Well, it won't help us at all. It's a complete because it's artificial. When something's artificial, it's an embarrassment, right? It's just an embarrassment. It's a complete embarrassment. So you got to be real. Whatever level we're on, let's perfect that, and gradually, everything is given unto us by the grace of Guru and Krishna. And don't try to jump over. Don't try to jump over. So otherwise, it's just embarrassing, and it's also a cause of fall down. It's a cause of fall down when one imitates great souls. What is that? I don't know the Sanskrit. One is to follow, and one is to imitate. So anu means following. So you have to follow the great souls, not imitate them. There's a difference there, like that. So, like that. Yes, Balaram Das Brahmachari.
Yeah, I read an interesting thing from Bhaktivinoda Thakur in relation to prematurely meditating on, like you could say your spiritual form, or your speculated spiritual form or whatever, just meditating on certain things prematurely. He said that, it was an interesting quote, he said that by doing that, instead of making progress towards that, you actually get an opposite reaction. You become attracted to, the impermanent. So, anyways, but yeah, just a little comment.
Okay, so we can end here. Is that okay? And the verse for tomorrow? It's already written. So you have an extra few minutes tomorrow for japa. Okay. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Shrinivasa Acharya ki jai, Dhananjaya Pandit ki jai, Gadadhara Pandit ki jai. He's got fantastic handwriting, right? You should.